Did the NFL just misjudge one of the most marketable rookies in recent memory? On draft night, cameras didn't just capture selections, they captured a slide. A quarterback many expected to hear his name called early kept waiting. Round after round passed. Analysts debated arm strength, decision-making, system fit. Some said the hype outweighed the tape. Others argued teams were overthinking it. By the time he was finally selected in the 5th round, the conversation had already split into two sides: justified caution or massive miscalculation. But here where things took a sharp turn. While front offices hesitated, brands didn't. Reports began circulating about a massive endorsement deal, numbers that raised eyebrows across the league. Figures typically reserved for proven superstars were suddenly attached to a rookie who hadn't taken a single regular season snap. If accurate, it would signal something bigger than football evaluation. It would suggest that influence, visibility, and cultural impact now carry weight equal to, or even greater than, draft position. And that's the tension at the center of this story. Scouts evaluate mechanics, footwork, and processing speed. Brands evaluate reach, engagement, and audience loyalty. One side studies film, the other studies market data. And in this case, the two worlds appeared to reach very different conclusions. Some fans believe the slide only fueled the momentum. Others argue that marketing hype can't replace on-field proof. Both perspectives carry weight, but what's undeniable is the shift in conversation. This isn't just about where a player was drafted, it's about how value is defined in today's NFL. Because if a 5th-round pick can generate first-round buzz or even franchise-level branding power, then maybe the league isn't just evaluating quarterbacks anymore. Maybe it's evaluating influence. And that changes everything. Draft night was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it turned into a question mark. When Shedeur Sanders' name wasn't called in the 1st round, the room shifted. Not just in the building, across social media, across sports talk shows, across front offices quietly watching the board unfold. The expectation had been clear: a high-profile college career, national exposure, big game experience, yet team after team passed. By the 2nd round, analysts started adjusting their tone. The conversation moved from when to why. Was it arm strength? Some scouts reportedly questioned velocity on deep outs. Was it pocket mobility? Others pointed to how often he played behind pressure in college. Decision-making under NFL speed became another debate topic. None of it sounded catastrophic, but collectively it created hesitation. And hesitation is expensive on draft night. By the 3rd round, the narrative had quietly changed. What once felt like a sure early selection now felt uncertain. Commentators began floating theories. Some suggested teams were wary of the spotlight that comes with the Sanders name. Others believed franchises simply didn't view him as a plug-and-play starter. No one said it outright, but the undertone was clear. Perception was colliding with projection. When he finally came off the board in the 5th round, it didn't feel normal. It felt layered. Some fans immediately called it disrespect. How does a quarterback with that resume slide that far? Others argued it was purely football, that hype doesn't override scouting reports. Both sides dug in, and that's when the tension really began. Because draft position in the NFL isn't just about talent. It's about timing, fit, risk tolerance, organizational philosophy. A team picking in the 1st round isn't just selecting a player, they're selecting a direction. And perhaps fairly or not, some front offices weren't ready to tie their future to the noise, expectations, and constant attention that follow a Sanders. But that wasn't the full picture. What made the slide more intriguing wasn't just where he was picked, it was what happened next. Within days, the conversation shifted from "why did he fall?" to "did teams just overthink this?" Because while franchises hesitated, other power players didn't. And that's when draft night stopped being the end of a story and started looking like the beginning of something much bigger. Here where things took a sharp turn. While NFL teams were still debating ceiling versus floor, Nike made a decision that raised eyebrows across the league. Instead of waiting to see how his rookie year unfolded, they reportedly moved aggressively. Not cautiously, not experimentally, aggressively. Reports claim the deal structure was unusually bold for a 5th-round quarterback. That alone shifted the tone of the conversation. Because endorsement giants don't invest heavily in uncertainty, they invest in trajectory. And Nike wasn't just buying a player, they were buying a presence. Some fans believe the brand saw what draft rooms didn't: market gravity, social influence, the ability to move product before ever throwing an NFL touchdown. The Sanders name carries weight, yes, but Shedeur had already built his own following long before draft night. College highlights traveled fast, interviews clipped even faster, every sideline moment turned into shareable content. That kind of traction matters in today's league. But this wasn't just about followers, it was about timing. The NFL is in a generational shift. Younger audiences, digital-first consumption, personality-driven marketing. Nike may have calculated that even if his on-field development took time, the off-field return would begin immediately. And that's when the conversation quietly shifted. Because suddenly, the question wasn't whether he should have gone earlier, it became whether teams misjudged the bigger picture. A quarterback can develop, arm strength can improve, processing speed sharpens with reps, but marketability, that's harder to manufacture. Still, not everyone was convinced. Skeptics argued endorsements don't equal wins, that branding doesn't convert third downs, that hype can inflate expectations faster than performance can match them. Fair points. The NFL has seen highly marketed rookies stumble before. But this situation felt different. Instead of shrinking after the draft slide, Shedeur leaned in, public appearances, confident messaging, controlled tone, no visible frustration. If anything, the fifth-round label became fuel. And what happened next caught everyone off guard. Because the buzz wasn't fading, it was growing. Sales spikes, jersey demand, limited releases moving quickly. Whether every reported number is exact or not, one thing became clear: interest wasn't slowing down. Draft night may have lowered his slot, but it might have raised his leverage. Then came the numbers that really stirred the pot. Not draft grades, not preseason stats, merchandise. Almost immediately, reports began circulating that Shedeur's jersey was among the top-selling rookie jerseys nationwide. Some outlets even suggested he was outperforming higher draft picks in early sales windows. Now, exact rankings can fluctuate week to week, and the NFL rarely releases full breakdowns, but the buzz alone was enough to ignite debate. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. Fifth-round quarterbacks aren't usually at the center of retail conversations. First-round stars get that spotlight, top 5 picks dominate the marketing push, that's the traditional formula. But this situation disrupted that formula. Some fans believe the draft slide actually amplified interest. The overlooked but unfazed storyline travels fast. Supporters rallied behind the idea that teams miscalculated, and in today's digital era, narratives spread quicker than ever. That's when the veteran versus rookie tension entered the chat. Established quarterbacks have spent years building their brands. Playoff runs, MVP votes, signature moments under pressure. Yet suddenly, a rookie who hadn't taken a regular season snap was trending in sales conversations alongside those names. That didn't sit comfortably with everyone. Analysts started asking subtle questions. Is this hype sustainable? Does jersey demand translate to long-term loyalty? Or is this just the energy of a fresh storyline? Fair concerns. But here, what made it interesting: the sales surge wasn't random. It followed coordinated drops, strategic visibility, limited edition releases. In other words, structure, not chaos. Nike appeared to understand something critical: scarcity creates urgency, and urgency drives headlines. And that's when the conversation quietly shifted again. Because the debate stopped being about whether he deserved the hype. It became about whether the league underestimated the power of branding in the modern era. In previous generations, performance created popularity. Now, the relationship works both ways. Visibility builds anticipation. Anticipation fuels engagement. Engagement drives revenue. Still, the biggest question remained unanswered. Could the on-field performance match the off-field momentum? Because merchandise can open doors, but only football can keep them open. Now let's rewind to the moment that quietly shaped this entire storyline. Draft night. Round after round passed. Cameras kept cutting to Shedeur's name still sitting on the board. Analysts debated arm strength, decision-making, scheme fit. Some questioned whether his college system inflated his numbers. Others wondered if the spotlight surrounding the Sanders name made teams cautious. And then it happened. He fell to the 5th round. For a quarterback with his profile, that raised eyebrows instantly. Some fans believed teams overthought it. Reports claimed certain front offices weren't fully convinced he was pro-ready. Rumors suggested interviews and private evaluations played a role. None of it was officially confirmed, but the speculation spread fast. Here's the part that changed everything. That draft slide didn't damage his brand. It strengthened it. Being overlooked created a chip-on-the-shoulder narrative. Supporters framed it as disrespect. Critics framed it as reality. Either way, attention multiplied. And attention is currency. That's when the rookie versus establishment dynamic quietly took shape. Every strong preseason throw felt amplified. Every positive training camp report felt like validation. Social media clips circulated with captions like, "They let him fall to the fifth." The narrative wasn't just about football anymore. It was about proving people wrong. But here, what made it even more interesting. The Browns weren't handing him anything. Cleveland already had quarterback depth, veteran presence, a system in place, so this wasn't a red carpet situation, it was a competition environment. Which meant one thing. If he earned snaps, he'd earn them publicly. And that's when preseason became more than warm-up games. Because now, every throw wasn't just about roster position. It was about rewriting draft night. And what happened next caught everyone off guard. Preseason was supposed to be quiet. Low-stakes vanilla playbooks, evaluation reps. Instead, it became a spotlight. The first time Shedeur stepped onto the field in a Browns uniform, the energy felt different. Not because he was the starter, not because the job was his, but because everyone wanted to see if the fifth-round debate would follow him into the pros. And the early flashes changed the tone. Quick reads, tight window throws, calm footwork under pressure, nothing reckless, nothing desperate, just controlled confidence. Analysts didn't crown him, but the conversation shifted. Instead of asking whether he belonged, they started asking how soon he could push for more reps. That's when speculation started heating up. Some fans believed the coaching staff saw more than they expected. Reports claimed internal evaluations were encouraging. Rumors suggested the quarterback room suddenly felt less settled than it looked on paper. None of it confirmed, but the chatter grew louder. Then came the body language moments. Veteran receivers reacting positively, teammates staying after practice, defensive players praising his poise in interviews, subtle signals, but in the NFL, subtle signals matter. And here where it gets interesting. The Browns didn't rush to declare anything. Publicly, it was still competition, still earning reps, still everyone gets a shot. But when coaches repeatedly mention one name first in press conferences, people notice. That's when the pressure flipped. It wasn't about proving he belonged anymore. It was about whether the organization was ready to lean into the momentum building around him. Because once fans start believing, expectations follow. And that's when things stop being developmental. They become directional. And that's when the conversation quietly shifted from "can he play" to something much bigger. Is he the future? It wasn't a press release. It wasn't a headline. It was a moment. When veteran leaders start speaking differently, people inside the building notice. And when one of the most respected voices in that locker room publicly says a young quarterback will get his shot, that's not random. That's positioning. Myles Garrett didn't overhype him, he didn't hand him the job, but he didn't dismiss him either. His tone was measured, calm, supportive, and in the NFL, tone matters. Because veterans don't attach themselves to uncertainty unless they see something real. Some fans believe that comment was a subtle endorsement. Reports claimed defensive players were energized by the idea of offensive stability. Rumors suggested the defense was tired of carrying games only to watch late collapses undo their effort. None of it officially confirmed, but the pattern felt familiar. Defenses want belief. They want consistency. They want a quarterback who gives them confidence that a 2-score lead won't evaporate in 10 minutes. And here what changed. Instead of conversations centered around past contracts and sunk costs, the energy began shifting toward potential, toward growth, toward what could be built instead of what had already failed. That's not just football talk. That's culture talk. When locker rooms begin protecting a young player, it usually means they've already chosen their direction internally, even if the depth chart hasn't caught up publicly. And that's when the situation becomes delicate. Because once veterans lean toward youth, it creates tension without anyone saying a word. Competition becomes layered, every rep matters more, every mistake feels heavier. And what happens next won't just define one quarterback. It will define which era Cleveland is truly stepping into. Here's the part nobody wants to admit. Draft position still shapes perception. It doesn't matter how many jerseys sell, it doesn't matter how loud the crowd gets at training camp. When you're a fifth-round pick, there's always a silent asterisk next to your name. Fair or not? Analysts questioned the arm's strength, scouts debated decision-making. Some reports claimed teams were unsure how his game would translate at the next level, none of it definitive but enough to create doubt. And doubt sticks. That's why every preseason throw feels magnified, every interception becomes a headline, every sideline exchange turns into body language analysis. But here's what's interesting. Some fans believe the draft slide actually amplified his brand. Instead of being handed expectations, he inherited skepticism. Instead of automatic respect, he had to generate it. That dynamic creates something powerful: urgency. Urgency sells. Urgency motivates. Urgency shifts narratives faster than hype ever could. Reports claimed multiple teams revisited their draft boards after his early flashes. Rumors suggested internal conversations about overthinking the evaluation. Again, nothing officially confirmed, but when production starts matching confidence, hindsight gets loud. And Cleveland understands the stakes. If he thrives, the fifth-round label becomes part of the legend. If he struggles, critics will point back to draft weekend and say, "See, that's why." There is no middle ground. That's what makes this situation volatile. Because now it's not just about competing for a starting job, it's about rewriting how he's viewed across the league. It's about whether marketability and on-field performance can finally align without contradiction. And if they do, the conversation around scouting, branding, and quarterback evaluation might quietly shift league-wide. But that depends on one thing: what happens when the real games start? At some point, the conversation has to zoom out. Because this was never just about arm strength. It was never just about footwork, mechanics, or draft grades. The real question is bigger. Did the NFL evaluate the wrong metric? For decades, quarterback scouting has centered around measurable traits: size, velocity, system fit, processing speed under pressure. Those boxes still matter, they always will. But the modern league isn't operating in the same ecosystem it did 10 years ago. Today, quarterbacks are brands before they take a snap. They're media ecosystems. They're revenue drivers. They're culture shifters. And that changes the equation. When a player walks into the league already moving merchandise, already trending online, already drawing national attention to preseason practices, that's not just hype, that's leverage. The league sells stars. Franchises sell belief. And belief is currency. So if a player has the ability to command attention, energize a fan base, and elevate a franchise's visibility overnight, shouldn't that factor into evaluation? Some traditionalists would say no, football is football, production decides everything. But here, the tension, production and presence are no longer separate categories. Confidence translates, leadership translates, command translates. The way a quarterback controls a locker room, the way teammates respond to him, the way fans invest emotionally, those are intangibles that don't show up on a scouting spreadsheet. And sometimes, those intangibles create outcomes that analytics can't predict. If he wins, the narrative flips instantly. The draft slide becomes a league-wide miscalculation. The skepticism becomes fuel. The fifth-round label becomes a marketing slogan. But if he struggles, critics will argue the NFL got it right, that hype-clouded judgment, that social impact isn't the same as Sunday execution. That's the gamble. Cleveland didn't just draft a quarterback, they drafted a spotlight, they drafted a storyline, they drafted a player who forces evaluators to rethink what value really means in 2026. Because the modern quarterback isn't just measured in touchdowns and interceptions anymore. He's measured in engagement, in momentum, in movement, And if this experiment works, if performance and presence collide successfully, the league may quietly start asking different questions on draft night. Not just can he make the throw, but can he move the league? If that becomes the new metric, then yes, maybe the NFL did evaluate the wrong one. And we're about to find out.